Thank you, and welcome, Wendy. I know you're on. You're due to be on about 10:55, so feel free to nip in and out until we get to that point. If that helps you. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Resources Committee. As usual, it is live streamed for the public meeting, and we would hope that will take us through till about only till about 10:30. So anyway, welcome to everybody who's joining us in person on Zoom, I should say. No, I'll start again. Welcome to everybody who's joining us on Teams, and both members of the committee and those who are joining in at different stages, and those who are observing. Are there any? I don't think there are any apologies, Debs.
No apologies.
Could I just ask everybody to confirm that they have declared any items of interest or connections, or wish to do so now? Good. And could I ask your approval to take items 4 to 10 in private? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So moving on to section 2, the minutes and actions from the previous meeting. Our last meeting was the 15th of November. The minutes are in your papers. Could I ask for approval as an accurate record? Thank you. Resources Committee action log and matters arising. I don't think we've actually got any. No. So we can move straight on to item 2.3.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. There actually are actions, but there are a couple of them that are ongoing, with updates anticipated for the next scheduled meeting.
Thank you. Sorry, when I was looking from one set of papers to another, the original...
It was a later circulation.
Yes, thank you. Could I ask for your approval for the proposals in there to carry them forward to the next item, next meeting? Okay. Thank you very much. So we haven't had any decisions since the last meeting, so that takes us on to section...
Yeah.
Pardon? So there was somebody trying to speak there, I think.
Chair, I've muted everybody on the meeting. I think there was maybe a wee glitch there, so if you can unmute yourself and we'll carry on.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Debs. So moving on to section 3, the financial monitoring and planning. Now I see, well, actually, James, Patrick and Lynn all on the screen. Who would like to introduce this item?
Lynn's going to introduce it today, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Over to you, Lynn, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Morning.
I think the key thing with this particular item is that although the papers were drafted before the board decision on requesting an additional amount of support from Scottish Government, that probably isn't immediately noticeable in the appendices, but it's contained, there's a paragraph in there in the actual main text of the report. So, Lynn, with that introduction, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We can touch on the 5 million just as I run through the report. Where we will see that getting built in is when we do the revised Q3 forecast, which will be the next report that will come to committee, but can certainly highlight where we are at the end of period 7. So again, I'm going to assume most of it is read because we've had various discussions around this previously, and members are well cited in terms of where we were at Q1 in terms of the forecasts at 18.9 million overspend around increases in overtime, staff pay costs, pensions, etc. So we have spoken about that a number of times. And basically on the back of that Q1 forecast, the mitigating actions were agreed and have since moved a bit and are reflected in the Q2 forecast. But again, all that's been discussed in previous meetings. So I suppose just really what I was going to call out in the period 7 report, in a year-to-date basis against budget, we're £9.5 million overspent against the original budget. But although that's not where we want to be, it is in line with our revised Q2 forecast, and that is really because a lot of the savings and mitigating actions are towards the back end of the financial year. So although it's a concerning number, it's in line with the revised plan, if that makes sense. When you look at the year-to-date position against the Q2 forecast on the dashboard of Appendix A, we're actually seeing that we're overachieving at the moment in terms of the Q2 forecast. We're about 800,000 ahead. So that really is reflective, as we've said before, of all the work that's ongoing across the organisation to really drive down the spend and deliver the mitigating actions. However, although we are in a good position at the moment, there are a number of risks with regards to overall delivery by year end, and that's reflected in the mitigating actions tracker, which is within the dashboard. There are a number of red, amber actions within there, some of which are due to deliver towards the end of the financial year, some of which are out with our control and we won't actually know until the end of the financial year. So that's why the overall revenue is still as a red risk critical in terms of overall delivery, despite the benefit we're seeing at the moment. So as was already mentioned, we've reviewed the position at the end of period 5, and depending on what happens with the high risk areas, we've estimated there could be an overspend of up to 5 million. And on that basis, the accountable officer has written to SG Scottish Government to request contingency funding to support the year-end position. So that is currently being reviewed by Scottish Government. We've had no formal update back from that yet. We're just awaiting confirmation or an update from Scottish Government around that request. So that's probably the key things around revenue. In terms of capital, at Q2, there was a decision taken that no further capital commitments would be made this year, and that's because we're really seeing an increase in front in expenditure in the earlier part of the financial year, which was always our intention for this year. We wanted to drive earlier spend. Typically, as members are aware, it's always been sort of February, March, where the majority of the capital budget has been spent. So we've really tried to turn that around this year, but it has meant we've now had to slow capital expenditure down, particularly going into the final quarter, given where we are and the progress that's been made in that area. It is a fluid position. There's discussions ongoing as we speak, in terms of we've reviewed the period 8 position we've discussed with our capital investment group, and we are looking at options to reduce or delay the spend for this financial year. So we'll have further updates on that in due course. And then in terms of reform, there is a small underspend against the Q2 forecast, but there's no significant movements to call out there. Overall, we are forecasting a bit of an underspend in reform, but that does help support the revenue position in terms of achieving that overall break-even budget position. So yeah, that's the key highlights from the report. So happy to stop there for any questions or feedback.
Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you for your comprehensive report. It's very, very clear. And I do like the way we've now got in terms of the finance dashboard, the people numbers showing the actual versus budget, which shows quite clearly where we are in comparison where we were at the budget stage. I think that's very helpful. And the mitigating actions tracker does highlight that probably the non-recurring item, the property sale, is probably one of the areas of most uncertainty at this point in time. I'll pass over to members of the committee for questions. Nothing? Oh, Tom.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And we know that the trackers in terms of those savings that need to be made is ongoing. My question is actually in relation to capital. And first of all, while we're slowing it down, the reverse of that is a compliment, in the sense that at least we're spending the money earlier and ensuring we make best use of the resource that's available. You mentioned having to achieve £6.7 million of slippage now and to get to the target, but also that dependency on my question is about the dependency on receipts from the disposal of estate. We know that might not come in this financial year. What's the implications for that in terms of the capital spend that we have? Was there a reliance on that receipt coming in, or could that figure actually worsen as that position becomes clearer?
Patrick, I think your hand up to answer that. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. And Tom, thanks for the question, and Lynn may kind of wish to add as well. So yeah, Tom, in terms of the forecast which Lynn has mentioned, we've already kind of built into that the kind of assumption that we would receive £1 million kind of capital kind of bounce from Anderson, and then we've discounted that out because of the kind of unlikelihood of receiving it. So I don't expect that position to kind of get worse. The major implications on the organisation is predominantly around two areas. It is the delayed investment in some estates projects, and the second kind of implication is on some digital kind of spend in terms of strengthening some of our networks, for example, at the kind of police college, are kind of the two of the main implications of kind of slowing the spend down. So yeah, there was a bit of a risk in there, but I don't anticipate that figure kind of getting worse on that basis. Lynn may want to add anything. I noticed her hand went up as well.
No, I'm fine, thank you. That covers it, thanks.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Tom, because at this stage, in previous years, we've been in a situation where we've been underspending and having to do an awful lot in the last 3 months. This time we're in the curious situation of having to slow it down, and there's only 3 months left, so the clock is ticking. Who's next? Alistair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the paper. It is very clear. I'd like to commend, first of all, the work that is going on to bring the budget back into line, the mitigating actions. I appreciate that it is, none of this is easy. There are hard choices to make as you're doing this, but I wonder if anybody could just speak to how the impact analysis of these hard choices takes place. I know that in terms of high risk, threat, harm, these are the areas that are protected, but some commentary around what is being impacted and how that is considered, through the control of the groups that are overseeing the mitigating actions would be really helpful. Thank you.
Patrick, it looks as if your hand up to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alistair, for the question. We've obviously kind of committed to you for bringing kind of a fuller kind of impact analysis to this group, which we will bring for the next committee meeting. DCC Graham and I are kind of working on this at the moment. It depends on what the mitigating action is in terms of where the impact analysis is kind of done. It's either through the kind of the overtime working group, either through the resource prioritisation strategic group, or at the CFPB or kind of SLB, and that's where we are having to pull the impact analysis from to give a condensed kind of picture to you. In terms of the ones that I am kind of closer to, is in particular the overtime working group, kind of, Alistair, and what we are kind of seeing is that we are holding kind of less people on shift to conclude kind of investigations. Frontline managers are making sure handovers are happening. The impact that we're currently looking at that is, in the short term, it's beneficial. We're reducing the overtime spend, but we do worry into the future, will that cause issues when it comes to court hearings, because in effect more officers are touching the cases, so to speak, which means the current kind of behaviour of the Crown, I actually don't know if ACC Middleton may wish to kind of comment on this, the current handling by the Crown is effectively near enough every officer that touches a case ends up getting added to kind of the call list to give evidence, which we are kind of having to work with the kind of Crown on. Secondly, kind of the other big impact that we're beginning to see, in particular due to the reduced officer numbers and trying to maintain the operational baseline levels is that a number of officers are effectively working the overtime, but trying to take the time off as time off in lieu. But in essence, because of the shortage of numbers at the moment, officers are unable to then take that time off in lieu, and as in line with police regulations, it ends up getting paid kind of in overtime. So there's a kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul element there, and I would say they're the kind of two biggest impacts that are coming out from the overtime working group at the moment, just to give you a bit of a feel.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you for that.
ACC Middleton, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to say that Patrick's absolutely right, and I suppose the focus is really on the overtime steering group at the moment because of the need for some really short-term actions. But this is complemented by a range of other programmes that are ongoing, and I'm sure the authority are aware of them or will be receiving other briefings in relation to them, such as the Local Policing Service Delivery Review, the Criminal Justice Improvement Group. So I speak to my space because Patrick raised it just around officer citations. And we're working very closely with the Crown agent, and indeed the courts as well through the Criminal Justice Board to try and improve the situation upstream. And of course, it's not just about police overtime, it's about the victim experience throughout the whole criminal justice system. So we're definitely focusing our attentions more at the front end. And I'll be coming back to the authority at some stage in the new year around the criminal justice improvement and what we can do within Police Scotland to reduce the burden that we are experiencing ourselves, but also then to improve the victim journey. So it's not sitting in splendid isolation. Indeed, as Patrick alluded to, there's a lot going on around this to do the longer term problem solving. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Alistair, are you happy with that response, or do you want to come back on that?
No, I appreciate the reassurances that we've been given, that this is being viewed as a whole system. Really appreciate that, and I look forward to that fuller paper coming at the next committee, as Patrick highlighted to us. So thank you.
Thank you. It's quite clear that when you're changing the way in which overtime is monitored and approved, there are some perhaps short-term implications until it settles down into the new pattern. But I do understand that the work that DCC Spears is doing in relation to looking at this from a fresh angle. Anybody else? No. Well, then I think, as has already been said, I mentioned it myself earlier, I think the quality of the papers and the way they're presented is extremely clear, but I don't in any way underestimate the amount of work required to actually deliver the savings targets that are being pushed around the organisation. We've only got just over 3 months to go, and it's clearly a very tricky time of year with it very difficult to estimate certain aspects of demand. But I'm very pleased to see the amount of grip that's on these numbers and the way they're being closely monitored by James, Patrick and Lynn and many others, I'm sure. So thank you very much. I think that gives us a feel for that. We're having, I think everybody knows that we'll be having a further discussion with DCC Connors on the 22nd of December in relation to the period 8 figures, but that's being taken quite separately. Right, that takes us on to item 3.2, financial regulations post-implementation review, paper from John McNallis. So John, you can take it that we've read the paper, but I'd be interested to hear any particular things you'd like to highlight.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Like I say, this was the post-implementation review, which members asked for when you approved the changes last year. So I would highlight overall, you'll see in the paper, it's been very positively received with good feedback from across the authority and Police Scotland. There's been quite a lot of benefits for this committee in particular. We've seen decision-making being speeding up, as well as governance being much more targeted and proportionate. There has been some important lessons learned. In particular, we now have a process in place to regularly update every year for any changes that are needed to financial regulations, so that hopefully down the line we don't see ourselves in the position that we found ourselves in last year, where we had to do a big bang change with lots and lots of changes. Hopefully now, and you'll see that within the paper, we're able to make small changes every year as things arise that need to be fixed effectively. And lastly, I think one thing to say is we focus a lot always on lessons learned, but we're not necessarily as good as celebrating success and sharing our success with others. So we have said in the paper, we've been sharing this work and some of the findings from this paper with other police authorities out there that we regularly talk to. And very last thing to say, this project has been quite successful, but a lot of that is down to close working with my colleagues across Police Scotland and Scottish Government as well. Without that relationships and the close workings, this wouldn't have worked. The cooperation has been key throughout, and I'd really like to thank all my colleagues as well for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much for a very clear report. I think you've highlighted, particularly in page 5, the lessons learned and next steps, which I think are really extremely helpful. It gives us a direction of travel, if you like, of what's going to happen going forward. But I think it's interesting your comment about the amount of time, appropriate contingency time should be included for complex projects. There's no doubt that everybody has got a degree of optimism of how long certain things take to do. But I think we've learned from a lot of the things that happen in both in SPA and Police Scotland, some things take a bit longer than people would wish. But it's a great result from this. So well done to you and team for all the hard work in implementing it and keeping an eye and monitoring how well it's working. I open it to questions from anybody on the board, or the committee, I should say. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, John. I would really want to pick up on the celebrating stroke highlighting success part of it, and I noticed within the paper that you've shared this work with the British Transport Police and the City of London Police. Just wonder if you've had any feedback from them, or how will they use this excellent piece of work to take forward their own reviews of their own financial regulations.
Thanks, Alistair. I actually had a meeting with colleagues in the City of London about 2 weeks ago where we were talking through this work, and they're starting to look at a similar review of their own governance. So very interested to hear about what we're doing, what we've done even, the process, the kind of project approach, so that again they can learn and take on some of the feedback. So yeah, I hope that this will really help then, and are able to share a lot of the project work and the planning with their team.
Yeah, now that's excellent to hear, and I think for me what it highlights is that Police Scotland doesn't work in isolation. It does, even in relation to governance, it shares good practice where appropriate with colleagues across the UK, and equally I'm sure we're open to good practice coming in and understanding the insight. So it's good to highlight that. Thank you.
And Alistair, I would also say that with our auditors, with Audit Scotland, we're also open to highlighting areas of good practice we've done in the past with some of our best value work and integrated assurance. So another area that we're quite keen, and they've been good at picking up in their national reports, as it were.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments? John, as Alistair just said, I think celebrating the achievements is a great approach to making sure everybody recognises the benefits that are being obtained, that they don't just sort of disappear under the surface. So well done, and thank you again for a very clear paper. So we were asked just to discuss that, and I think we've done that. So that brings us to the end of the public session. So we need to pause for a moment or two to allow live streaming